It is also quite possible, as always is the case, that early rising of such belief would be secret. That men would gather first to mature their own ideas and to escape the eternal stigma of unorthodoxy which has followed thinkers since the beginning of time. Thus, these precious discoveries, following in the pattern and practice of the older mysteries, would be communicated only to an elect, only to those who were regarded as capable of understanding correctly this new dimension of things. Which brings us to the next point in connection with the Hermetic philosophy, and that is its relationship to the mystery systems of the world at that time. We have mentioned the state religions. We must always remember that behind each state religion was some kind of a mystical or metaphysical structure. Antiquity did not know of a religion without mysteries. And by mysteries now we do not mean secrets in the general sense of the word, but structures, ethical, moral, spiritual institutions, sacred colleges or schools. And they were called mysteries because they were sealed or closed from the profane, even as though they had been closed by some kind of an hermetic stopple. These mysteries always had a deeper dimension than the general opinions of the people. As far back as the 6th century, when Pythagoras traveled throughout the Near East and the southern parts of Europe and finally into Far Asia, he came back fully convinced that in their esoteric schools, all the great religions of the world were already teaching the same thing. The average person hadn't discovered this, however, that the confusion resulting in the collapse of the outer structure of religion of many of these peoples threw a great and sudden weight upon the esoteric schools. And these esoteric schools were not essentially theological as we know it today, and therefore they were not quite as vulnerable as the so-called popular religions. These so-called esoteric schools were actually institutions of higher learning. And even though you might lose faith in your deities, you could not deny the multiplication table. You could not deny the value of herbs and medicines in healing. You could not deny the secrets of bone setting. You could not deny the motion of the heavenly bodies, nor the secrets of navigation. You could no longer perhaps accept certain beliefs, but you were still leaning heavily upon jurisprudence, which was originally taught in these temples. You were leaning very heavily upon the laws and canons of art, of sculpture, and of music. All the great scientific knowledge, which was originally dedicated to the gods and was disseminated through the schools of these gods, this knowledge did not die with the popular faith. Thus, the esoteric schools, all the mysteries, perhaps came forward more rapidly after the decline of the state religions. Men now had a new level of value upon which to pin their faith. And it is quite possible that it was at this time that the gradual shift from a spiritual to a scientific way of life actually began. And as it took thousands of years to create the philosophical religious systems of the ancients, the last 2,000 years has been largely dedicated to the shift from the theological foundation of exoteric religion to the great mystery sciences of esoteric religion. In any event, the learned, the leading minds, those who became the opinion makers of their own days, certainly must have recognized that you could not destroy the school with the temple, that the school had to go on. that man still had to learn. The increasing dignity of the school is expressed in Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and Hermetic philosophy, and to a degree in the Essene and Therapeutae doctrines, certainly in the Kabbalism of the early Jewish mystics, rising from Rabbi Akiva, who belongs to this same critical period and is just about as difficult to orient as any of the others. Thus, even at the beginning, you see the struggle taking form that was finally to emerge. The philosophizing and the revelation of certain great secrets from the temples could no longer be stopped. The breaking down of the mystery institutions, the final dispersing of the priesthoods, the conquering of the areas, the pillaging of the great sanctuaries, scattering their teachers, meant only the inevitable need for the preservation of ideas. And the only way to preserve them was to throw them into the very public mind from which they had once been protected. Because only then could the common man be the keeper of the mystery. Otherwise it would have died with that generation. But Taoism, the teaching of Lao Tzu, at about the beginning of the Christian era, moved from a philosophical to a theological foundation, and refined a tremendous expansion of Chinese metaphysics, coinciding closely with, say, the 1st century AD. At about the same time, we find a tremendous internal change in the structure of Buddhism. We find as the result of the discovery of the mysterious secret books of Buddha in the Iron Tower by the Buddhist patriarch Nagarjuna, that Buddhism moved from a lofty philosophic agnosticism into a very involved, profound, and emotionally mature metaphysics, with the advent of the Pure Land doctrine, or the Northern School, Mahayana Buddhism. As soon as Mahayana arose, the entire course of Buddhist history changed. And while there are still groups clinging strongly to the old way, most of the progress in Buddhism has been the result of the Mahayana groups operating in China, Korea, and Japan. They have represented the spearhead of the modernism of religion in Asia. About the same period, there were marked changes in Hinduism. The rise of mystical and transcendental schools for the interpretation of the ancient Vedic and Puranic writings. This change was also an enlargement into mysticism, a tremendous growth of metaphysical speculation, and the development of systems of meditation and various types of mystical experience doctrines, which were to play an important part in Asiatic culture. Even while Christianity was in its infancy, its direction was abruptly changed at almost the same time by the ministry of St. Paul. The Christianity of the four Gospels has gradually been absorbed into the Christology of the epistles. And St. Paul stands forth as the person who transforms the moral code of Jesus into a highly transcendental, universal doctrine of regeneration and redemption. Also in this same time, cross groups began to emerge, mingling Greek thought with thinking of Christianity, and producing such peculiar groups as the Gnostics and the followers of Mayan, the Manichaean group. In all of these instances, one simple point stands out. the gradual transformation of older doctrines into highly mystical revelations.